This is a Bulova President. This is a dress watch that was made in 1960. And this is a unique one. It's going to be an interesting one to work on because it has a one-piece case, meaning that the case back cannot be taken off of it. In order to extract the movement from this to service it, I'm going to have to remove the crystal and then pull the movement out through the front. So I've never worked on one like this before, and I know these are kind of a pain to work on. So this will be an interesting experience. Let's go ahead and look at the initial Timegrapher readings and see what our starting point is before we start servicing it. That way we can see where we're going to start from and what our goals are. Here are our initial Timegrapher readings for the Bulova President. This movement obviously needs to be serviced really badly. The numbers are pretty bad. You can see there's quite a bit of variation. It's jumping from -2 seconds to -11 seconds. It's got really, really low amplitude, only 158 degrees. It should be at least 250. The beat error is really high at 1.6 milliseconds too. That needs to be corrected. So this is a watch that desperately needs to be serviced. I think if we take this apart, clean and relubricate all the parts, give it a new mainspring, we should get the amplitude back up where it needs to be, and I should be able to correct the rate then and the beat error and get them back within normal ranges where they should be, and have it where it's giving more consistent timekeeping, because we can see here it's just jumping around. It went down to -9, now it's up to -14. The traces just aren't staying consistent. Now it's down to -26. So I think this definitely needs to be serviced, and that's what we're going to start on now. This Bulova watch has an unusual case by modern standards. It has a front-loading case, which means that the movement comes out through the front. We have to take the crystal off to get the movement out. And because you can't get to the stem retaining screw on either side of the movement, this has a two-piece stem. And what it is you pull the stem out and it pops completely out. It's a two-piece stem, so half of it comes out and then the other half stays in the movement. And that allows us to drop the movement out through the front after we take the crystal off. So the first thing we're going to do is take that stem off, and I'll show you how that's done. I have a special tool here that's used for that, and it basically is a little lever that sticks under the stem and lets you pry it off. So what you do is you take the watch and you pull the stem out to the time setting position, and then you insert this from the underside of the movement, or the underside of the case. Stick that in under the crown. Normally you would stick it under there and then kind of pry it up, and it would pop the crown up. I got it out, but that's not a two-piece stem, so I hope I didn't damage something by pulling that out. I've got to look at the movement and see what's going on there. But that's worrying to me because it's not a two-piece stem like I thought it was going to be. And I don't know how you would get the stem out otherwise with this type of a movement, because the back of the case absolutely does not come off. This is a one-piece case, so this case cannot be opened from the back to get to the movement. It has to come out through the front. So let's take it out and see what's going on. To get the crystal off on this one, this just has an ordinary acrylic crystal, so we're going to use a crystal lift to pick it up with. And so I'm just going to tighten the jaws of this around the crystal and lift it off. And you want to be careful not to tighten it too much. You just want to tighten them just enough that the crystal will lift out. Because if you tighten it too much, you can damage the crystal. We don't want to break it. We just want to get it lifted off the watch. There we go. And then you don't want to leave the crystal in the crystal lift because keeping it under tension will damage it. So we'll drop it out of the crystal lift, and I'll put it into a Ziploc bag for safekeeping until we're ready to use it again. Now the movement should just drop out to the front of the watch here. It's not wanting to come out. Yeah, it's strange. It should just drop right out. You know what? I'll bet you're supposed to pry the bezel up off of it, because it looks like there's a line. It looks like there's a line along the top there where maybe you could pry the bezel off. I wonder if that's how you're supposed to open this thing. It looks like someone may have pried it apart there on this end. Do that. I'm going to put the crystal back in. Oh, the bezel does come off. It separates like that. I stuck a razor blade into the edge there on the bottom side of the watch, down under the second hand. I used this X-Acto knife with a flat edge blade and just kind of pushed it in there gently, and it popped right off. So now the movement should come out once we lift this off. Look at that. There's the movement, and we need to get the hands off of it so that I can look at the keyless works and make sure I didn't screw something up when I pulled that stem out. I got the hour hand and minute hand off. I thought I had the camera running when I took those off, and I didn't, so you didn't get to see that. But I used my hand levers to pry them up like I normally do, and you can see that in my other videos. I need to get the second hand off, and it's so close to the dial that I'm going to have a hard time getting the hand levers under there. I'm going to do that off camera so that I can see what I'm doing better. But basically the way it works, I've got a piece of plastic to protect the dial from damage, and I'm going to try to get the hand levers worked under the hand and pop it up off there. Alright, that came off a little easier than I thought it would, and it's stuck to the hand is actually stuck to my plastic now, so I'm going to have to get it off there with tweezers and put it in the tray. The next thing we need to do is remove the dial, and it should be held on by a couple of dial screws. See if we can find those. Okay, it looks like there's one right there. And there should be one just like it on the other side of the movement. So I'll go ahead and loosen those and we can pull the dial off. Alright, I've got the dial screws out, so the dial should just lift right off. And there it goes. There's the dial side of the movement. I'm going to lay that on my casing cushion here so we can take stuff off of it. First thing I need to do is remove the dial washer. And then the hour wheel. And then before we can take off the cannon pinion, we need to remove the rest of the keyless works. And so the first thing we're going to take off is the set bridge, which is held on by a single screw right there. And that covers up the minute wheel and the various parts of the keyless works. I want to take a look at that though before I take it apart, because I want to make sure I didn't damage something when I pulled that stem. I've unscrewed the set bridge retaining screw, so let's take it out. Then we can lift the set bridge off. It'll have to be disengaged. The spring on it will have to be disengaged from the detent lever here. There we go. Now we need to take out the yoke spring next. And the yoke spring, you can see right here, it goes along here and then back against the yoke. And it looks to me like, no, it's in the right place. I thought it had slipped out. So we need to get that off, and that's going to be a tricky thing to get off because it's going to want to fly across the room when I pop it out. I'm going to have to stick a little screwdriver under to free it up from the tension that's under there in between this part of the movement base plate and the yoke there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a finger across part of it and then reach in with the screwdriver and pop it out. I got the yoke spring dislodged. I did that off camera so I could look at it through a magnifier while I was working. Now we can lift off the minute wheel next. And then we can lift off the intermediate wheel here. And then we can lift off the yoke, which doesn't want to come off with the pen. There we go. And then we can lift out the clutch. And I'm not sure if the winding pinion will come out. Yeah, there it goes. I thought maybe the detent lever was covering it too much. The detent lever is held in place by a screw on the other side of the movement, so we need to turn the movement over and loosen that screw. And I need to look at the detent lever after we pull it out and make sure that the pin on the bottom of it wasn't damaged when I pulled the stem out, because that pin on the bottom of the detent lever engages with a groove in the stem to hold the stem in place. So let's go ahead and turn the movement base plate over and loosen the stem retaining screw, which is that screw right there. That's what holds the detent lever in place. So if we unscrew that, the detent lever should fall right out. There's the detent lever, and that's the underside of it. It looks undamaged, so I think we're going to be good here. The next thing we need to do is we need to pull the cannon pinion. And to do that, we're going to use a pen vise. Here's the pen vise. This pen vise I use has interchangeable jaws. It has 4 different sizes of jaws, and for cannon pinions on wristwatches, I virtually always use the smallest jaws. And what I'm going to do is we're going to pick up the movement, and the cannon pinion is this part right here, and it attaches to the lower part of the staff for the center wheel. And so we're going to pull it off using a pen vise. And so I'm going to put the pen vise over the cannon pinion, tighten the jaws of it, and then what we want to do is we want to pull straight. You don't want to pull at an angle because you can bend the pivot, or you can bend the post for the center wheel if you pull it at an angle. We're going to pull it straight and just give it a little bit of rotation to help it come off. And you want to pull it slow and gently, not fast. You don't want to pop it off real quickly because you could still damage stuff that way. So you want to just slowly and gently pull it until it pops off. And there you can see the lower post for the center wheel that the cannon pinion had rode on. So now we can put this into a movement holder with the Watchmaker side of the movement up so we can start disassembling things on this side of the movement. Here's the Watchmaker side of the movement, and the first things we need to do are to take off the ratchet wheel and the crown wheel. The ratchet wheel has a conventional screw in the center of it for us to take off. The crown wheel is kind of unusual on this one because it's held on by 2 screws here instead of having a central screw. It has a retaining plate that holds the crown wheel in place, and that retaining plate is held on by those 2 screws. And so those 2 screws work normally. They're not left-handed screws like the screws that normally hold a crown wheel on. Something we need to do before we take off these parts is we need to make sure there's no tension in the mainspring. So what I did for this is I put a screwdriver in the screw for the ratchet wheel because that will hold the mainspring steady while we're releasing tension in it. And then I push the click out of the way and let the let the mainspring barrel slowly rotate through my fingers like that, using the screwdriver to hold it until the spring tension was released. This watch hasn't been wound up in several months, but even one that hasn't been wound up in a long time, that has run down to where it doesn't have enough power to power the movement, will still have some tension in the spring that you want to release before you pull off these wheels, because when you do, it can release what little tension is left rapidly into the drivetrain wheels and damage them, and we don't want that to happen. So I've done that first. Now I'm going to go ahead and loosen the screws that hold the ratchet wheel and crown wheel on. I have the screws off for those. I'm going to have to, use a screwdriver to get this to pop off. There we go. This is coming off as a single unit, but these are actually two parts. There's a retaining plate at the top and then the wheel itself. And let me show you how those work. There we go. Now you can see the retaining plate and the crown wheel. The click on this watch doesn't have a retaining screw like most of them do. It just sits down here underneath the ratchet wheel, and the ratchet wheel holds it in place, so we can just lift it right out. Now we need to get the click spring out, and the click spring in this is a pretty conventional looking click spring. It looks like a little cane, just like on most watches. And I'm going to have to get it out the same way I got out the yoke spring. I'm going to have to hold a finger over part of it and pop it out with a little screwdriver. And I'm going to do that off camera so I can see what I'm doing without losing this little spring. Because these things are so tiny, they're almost impossible to find if you lose one. I've taken the click spring out. Now we can't take the barrel bridge out yet because we need to get the train bridge off first, because the center wheel goes over the top of the mainspring barrel. And so I want to take off those parts first before we take off the barrel bridge and the mainspring barrel. So let's go ahead and do that. There's two screws that hold on the train bridge on this watch. There's one right here and there's one over here. So we'll go ahead and take those off, and then we can lift the train bridge off. Get the train bridge screws unscrewed. Now the train bridge may have to be pried up slightly to get it started with a screwdriver, and there's should be some little slots to stick a screwdriver in for that purpose, and there are. If we look at the edge of the movement here, we can see little slots there underneath the train bridge, and there's one under the barrel bridge here for when we take it off. You want to do this real gently so it doesn't fly off and bend the pivots on the wheels underneath it. There we go. It looks like one of the wheels is stuck to it anyway. Looks like the third wheel stuck to it, probably because the lubricants are dried up. Let me try to carefully get that separated from there. There we go. Now we can lift out the other wheels. The center wheel is the one that really should have come out first because it's on the top. Then we can take the fourth wheel. The fourth wheel has a long spindle at the bottom, but because that's what the second hand rides on, is the bottom part of that. We have to be careful not to bend or break that, or else the second hand won't go on correctly. Okay, I think we can get the escape wheel as well. Yeah, there we go. Now let's go ahead and take the barrel bridge and barrel out, and then we'll go for then we'll take out the balance wheel. There's a couple slots here that you can stick a screwdriver in to pry the barrel bridge up as well. And there's one right here. There we go. And there's one on the other side, which we may not need to use. It looks like it may be loose enough. Yeah, we're good. So let's go ahead and lift that off. When I lifted off the barrel bridge, another part came out with it, and that's the stem retaining screw. This goes into the movement base plate and then sticks up through the top part of it sticks up through the barrel bridge so that you can get a screwdriver to it. Usually that stays in the base plate when you lift the barrel bridge, and then it has to be lifted off by itself, but for some reason it decided to stick to the barrel bridge on this one. Now we can lift out the mainspring barrel. Just like that. And the next thing we need to do, before I take off the balance wheel, I want to open up the shock protection spring on it and take off the upper balance jewels. This has what's called a KIF shock protection system, so it's a little bit different than the ankle block systems on other watches I've worked on. Instead of a spring we have to dislodge two little metal tines and then lift it up, this one has to be partially rotated a little bit, and then it hinges upward. Unlike the springs that have to be rotated to be removed on the Citizen movement that was used in the HMT watch I've worked on, or on the similar system used on the Russian watch that I tried to work on a while back, This one can't be turned either direction. This one only can be turned to loosen it counterclockwise. So we have to turn it counterclockwise until it will pop out. And then when we put it back together, we'll rotate it clockwise to relatch it. So let's see if we can get in here and do this. I'm gonna try to do it under the camera so that you can see what I'm doing. There we go. Now it's, oh, there we go. That's almost there, I think. Not quite, almost though. There we go. Now it's in the opening, so it's popped open just slightly. So we can use our tweezers then to carefully lift it up because it hinges upward like an Inca block spring does. But we want to be careful not to break it when we do this because this would be very difficult to replace. I had to look at it off camera under my eye loop just to make sure that I did this correctly without breaking that spring, but I did get it hinged upward. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use a jewel picker to reach in there and grab it and pick up the jewels. And there's actually two jewels in here. There's a cap jewel, which is what you see at the top there, and then there's a lower jewel underneath it. The pivot for the balance wheel sticks through the lower jewel all the way through it, and then the end of it touches up against the cap jewel. And you should be able to see that once I pull this out. Oh, there we go. Now it's out. Okay, it looks like the upper and lower jewel came out together, so they're stuck together by lubricants. I'm going to have to separate those when I clean them later. But you can see the pivot for the balance wheel sticking up then through the hole there in the balance cock, and then it would go all the way through that lower jewel and end up against the cap jewel that I just pulled out together. Now we're going to have to take apart a system just like this on the bottom of the movement. But the first thing we need to do now is I need to reclose that spring, so that when I clean these parts, the spring doesn't get broken accidentally. And actually, that's not so important on the balance wheel because it gets clean just by dipping it in one dip. But when we do the one for the lower jewel, which is in the base plate of the movement, we definitely need to close that spring up before we put it into the watch cleaning machine. So I think this one I'm going to leave it alone. I'm just going to hinge it back shut but not relatch it because it's such a pain to unlatch these TIF springs. But the one that we do for the lower jewels on the base plate, I'm going to have to relatch before we clean the parts. Now I'm going to go ahead and take out the balance cock and balance wheel now. And it's held on by a single screw that you can see there. I've unscrewed the screw and now I can lift it out. If we look up here, you can see there's a slot for sticking a screwdriver in for loosening up the balance cock, just like there was for the barrel bridge and the train bridge. And so what we're going to do is we're going to stick the screwdriver in here and just gently rotate it. You don't want to pop it up real fast or else it can go flying and can bend up the hairspring and damage it. So you just want to just gently, yeah, even that was a little more than I liked, more movement than I liked. But go ahead and lift this up. Whoa, that wasn't good at all. There we go. So what I'm going to do with this now is I'm going to set it down and then I'm going to flip it over real gently so we don't damage anything. And then I want to position the wheel so that its pivot goes into the hole in the balance cock. You want to do this gently so you don't break or bend the pivot. There we go. The reason that we're doing this is because it keeps the spring concentric so it doesn't get stretched or distorted while we're storing the balance cock. And I'm going to store it upside down like this because you don't want the pressure from the weight of the balance cock on the hairspring. So I'm just going to store it just like this in my parts tray. Here you can see the parts tray and I'll just lay it in here just like that. And we'll store it like that until we're ready to clean it and reinstall it. The last thing we need to take off on this side of the movement is going to be the pallet fork and pallet bridge. And right there's the pallet bridge. Now the pallet bridge is held on by two screws. There's one here and there's a larger screw over here. So we need to take those off first. I've loosened both of those screws and they're kind of hard to reach with the tweezers. Okay, now we need to get that off and it needs to be probably pried off as well very carefully so we don't bend the pivot on the pallet fork. And we can lift it off. Now we can take out the pallet fork itself. We need to take the mainspring barrel apart too because I've got a new mainspring for this. And so we need to get the old one out so we can clean the barrel and the barrel arbor. The way that we do this is we find the top of the We find the side of the barrel arbor that has the lid, which is actually the side that faces down in the movement. And we put it facing upward, the lid side upward. And then what we do is we just set it on a hard surface like our table here and push down with our fingers on the edges of it. And you just heard the snap as the lid came off. And now we can see it's partially pushed up there, but it's not quite. Oh yeah, maybe it is. I think I can get the tweezers in there and take the lid off now. Yeah, there we go. Just lift the lid right off. And then there's our old mainspring. Now take note of which direction that the mainspring spirals on there, which direction the coils go. Because when we install the new mainspring, we need to make sure that we install it the exact same way. Now I have a factory original Bulova mainspring that comes in a plastic holder that keeps it compressed to the right diameter so it can be pushed directly into the barrel. And it actually has marked on it barrel side, so you know which side to push of the holder to put down on the barrel. But if you're using a mainspring made by somebody else, then you're going to need to make sure that you keep note of this so that you put it in the correct way. So let's go ahead and get the barrel arbor out and the mainspring out. And you can see I'm kind of lifting it out with the tweezers. The goal is usually to try to gently get this pulled out, but it always spirals out in my hand like that. Ooh, and then the mainspring just flew away. But there's our barrel arbor, and we're going to replace this mainspring anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and get the arbor out of it so that we can clean it. There we go. There's the barrel arbor, and the barrel and the lid. All those parts will go into the wash cleaning machine, and I'll just toss out that mainspring because I've got a brand new one for it. Okay, the only thing we need to disassemble in the movement now is we need to flip it over and open up the KIF jewel spring on the bottom of the base plate and get those jewels out, and then reclose that spring, and then we'll be ready to clean all the parts. And so I'm going to take it out of the movement holder for that purpose. Set it here on my piece of paper. Just like the one on the balance cock, this rotates counterclockwise, and these curved point tweezers are really useful for reaching in for that. So I'm just going to, right there's the opening we needed to come out through. So I'm just going to try to rotate these tines. There we go. I think that's it. I think it's out now. Yeah, there we go. It's open. There we go. Now I'll use the jewel picker again. And it looks like the upper and lower ones are coming out together on the jewel picker, just like the ones on the balance cock did. Let's see if we can get the camera to focus on so you can see them. There we go. I think that's about as sharp as it's going to get. Those will come apart when we clean them. So the movement is entirely disassembled now. It's ready for us to clean it. I do need to close this KIF spring back up and relatch it. So we'll see if we can do that now. Carefully so we don't break something. To do this, to get them relatched, you have to kind of push down on the part that goes into the opening and hold it down while you're turning these with another pair of tweezers. That's hard for me to do on camera, so I'm going to do it off camera. But that's the entire movement disassembly. Aside from that, the next thing we're going to do is clean the parts. And I'm not going to do a cleaning video for this movement because my watch cleaning video shows how watches are cleaned, and all of them are cleaned using the exact same procedure. I'm going to do the same thing on this I do in the video. I'm going to peg the jewel holes. I'm going to pit the pivots on the wheels, and then I'm going to put all the parts except for the balance jewels, the pallet fork, and the balance wheel and balance cock. Everything except for those parts are going to go into the wash cleaning machine and be cleaned. And the balance cock and balance wheel and the balance jewels and the pallet fork are all cleaned by hand. And the procedure for doing that is also shown in that video. So if you want to see how the cleaning process is done, that'll be linked in the description for this video, and you can watch it. And then the next video I make for this watch is going to show the reassembly process once I have everything cleaned.